to say anything to start? I'm
There
gonna
we
make
go.
you. Okay, cool.
Well, welcome. Sorry about that. I was having it wasn't letting me in. All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we are quickly populating. This is Elizabeth. Is that correct, Elizabeth Keys? Wonderful. Um, I am just gonna hand things over to you and let you start the session. Um, I'll be back here if you have any questions. I think Coven Roundtree, our chief of HR, is going to try to. He's not quite back yet, but he's going to try to be in here as well in case any questions come up from our end. But welcome and thank you so much for taking this time with us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Um, I'm going to put up the roadmap here. Some of this will be familiar to some of you, some new to everybody. There'll be a mix. So if you'll bear with me, what I'm going to do is move reasonably quickly through these points, sort of what the system really is and how it's working right now. Really zero in on enforcement issues, and then talk about safety planning, which means both what happens if ICE shows up at the libraries or other places, um, and useful information for affected community members. The very last slide. So throughout, and actually, let me put this, I will put these slides in the chat. They're all on a Google Drive and shareable, usable. I do not need attribution. Use them as your own. Throughout the slides, they're hyperlinks. So if you do want further information, a deeper dive on anything, you'll have access to things I think are reasonably reputable. My goals today are to leave you with helpful information to share with people who are concerned, and especially in a time of sort of heightened anxiety, to have a much sharper sense of where the anxiety is justified, who's really at sort of more imminent risk, and who's not, and what can those folks be doing in the meantime? Um, so with that, I'm going to jump in. I think I'm jumping in. There we go. Immigration basics. Um, just a couple of definitional things really quick. There's U.S. citizens. Actually, you know what? This is better on the next slide, so scratch this. Here we go. I think of immigration as a hierarchy of different statuses, and at the very top, the safest, most secure are U.S. citizens. Um, Whether that's at birth or through naturalization, those folks are fine, and I mean it. Uh, People who naturalize are worried right now. They do not need to be. That's a year 5 of the Trump administration problem, and since it's only supposed to be 4 years, you get my drift. It's not coming at us. Likewise, birthright citizenship, there's a lot of noise about that, but it is still people born in this country are citizens, regardless of status. And that is going to be fought. And it's also a statutory right. So Congress would need to get involved. Those folks are safe. I know they don't feel safe, but they are safe. One step down, green card holders, whether we call them lawful permanent residents, LPRs, green cards, super stable immigration status. It's the step that's required before citizenship. So those folks are on that path. Then there are some people on different visas where eventually they'll be on the path to green card and citizenship. A couple of the ones you may see more frequently are people here who were admitted as refugees or who won their asylum case already. There's others, but those are ones where there's already a clear path. Then I have this green line. Underneath that, there is no automatic path. So people on other kinds of visas, not on a path. The undocumented, not on a path. And that's whether they came illegally at the outset or came legally but overstayed. They're undocumented. We'll talk about what risks they face, but at least for this slide, what I'm trying to get at is there's no automatic path that people can just line up and join. Couple of the ones in the middle that we do see a lot of throughout Maryland, temporary protected status and DACA. So I just wanted to take a moment to explain what those are. Um, TPS, which we really have a lot of Salvadorans with TPS in Maryland, that is something Congress created that category, but it's really an executive branch creature. The executive branch, the administration can decide which countries benefit from TPS and they can issue it and they can rescind it. Not as easily as they think, but it's within their power. And so we do worry about TPS being taken away. It was just narrowed for Haitians last week. It's still there, but shorter time frames. Um, and it's what I call a limbo status because all it is, they're not above the green line, they're not on a path, but they have work permits and they have this promise of not being deported back to a country that's in strife, natural disaster, civil war, etc. Sometimes it lasts for forever. Well, feels like forever. Salvadorans have had TPS for over 20 years. So the temporary part is a little bit of a misnomer. And those folks obviously are very embedded in our communities. Usually their children are citizens as well. So we see that a lot. DACA, people tend to know really briefly, it's for people brought here as kids before 16. What's interesting and similar to TPS, they just get a work permit and a promise of not being deported. They are also not above the green line. There's no automatic path. Weirdly, DACA is limited to folks who were here as of June 2007. So a lot of our younger people, even though we might think of them as being sort of like dreamers, they technically are not going to qualify for DACA anymore because they came after 2007. I do think there will be legislation for DACA even in this administration. I'm going to say something positive. But for now, it's definitely a limbo status. Stay tuned. Also, feel free to drop questions in the chat, and I'm going to volunteer Bethany to keep an eye on the chat to see if there's anything worth interrupting me for as I move fairly quickly through. Okay, so in terms of why people can't just get in line, to be admitted above that green line from the previous slide, you have to, there's work-based ones, but those tend not to be as relevant to us. Only certain family relationships qualify. So US citizens can apply for a bunch of people. Unmarried children under 21, spouses and parents, those come in immediately. And then these other categories, unmarried older children, married older children, siblings. Green card holders slash LPRs have a smaller set of people, but they can apply for spouse and unmarried children under 21 and unmarried older children. If you do not have a US citizen or green card holder in one of those relationships who can petition for you, there is no line to get into. And the line itself is pretty long. So I put a few of the common wait times as of this month. They're capped by category and by country. And it gets really complicated, but just to say your wait time may vary based on where you're from. So you see here that first category, unmarried, older children, like a 25-year-old kid of US citizen. Generally, they're waiting 9 years to come, 20 if from Mexico. And you can see the other categories. The green card family members actually are a little faster. I can get into the reasons for that, but just to know, it's just how it is. The source of this is the State Department Visa Bulletin. I actually did not put a link to that in here, but if you're curious, it's got all kinds of cool things to look at. It's updated monthly. So in terms of the system itself, it's important for lots of reasons to keep these entities straight. On the left-hand side, Homeland Security, many, many, many functions, but immigration-wise, the three big ones are ICE, which does interior enforcement. So they're the ones who could theoretically be coming to libraries, looking for people to arrest for immigration purposes. They're also the attorneys in court. They do lots of different things. Detention, etc. And then the next line down is the benefits, folks. Anytime you're applying for a visa, asylum status, citizenship, you're dealing with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And then I'm not going to talk much about Customs and Border Protection because they're only at the border, and I'm focusing on what's possible in the interior today. But that's all DHS. The immigration courts themselves are in Department of Justice. They're administrative courts housed inside Justice, so they're not part of DHS. That separation was sort of seen as really important. That's where they are. And then sometimes other agencies get involved, state labor, Department of Education, as long as we have that. Um, so lots of things, and people in the system tend to get quite confused over who is in charge of what part. So I just wanted to offer that up to you as well. In terms of the removal process, so I'll go through sort of three pieces of this. One is the arrest, and that's when an ICE officer, typically an ICE officer, encounters somebody they have a suspicion is a non-citizen and arrest them, wherein either two things could happen. And I'll explain this a little more in a sec, but the arrest usually leads to the start of an immigration court process under the Department of Justice sort of court system. Some folks, if they already have an old order, or more on this to come, they've come in the last 2 years, do not have a right to the court process. So they could just be probably detained and removed. Um, but that all happens with an arrest. ICE has an arrest warrant. It's an administrative warrant, and I'll show you what those look like in a sec. And that launches this whole thing. Next, some of those folks will be detained. Largely, that's people with criminal issues, especially drug issues, but also kind of more violent crimes. Unfortunately, now the law says if you've been accused of shoplifting, you shall be detained. So some minor crimes. But important to realize here is that for the moment, ICE has really limited detention space. So most people are released, maybe with an ankle monitor, maybe just with instructions to check in. The administration is working on increasing its detention capacity, so that will likely shift. But for now, they just don't have the capacity to detain people. So for the duration of the court process, most people are out. And that's really important because as we'll see, the court process is really long. After, I should have put the court process on here, but after there's a removal order, then ICE can remove people. Okay. Each step of this requires people, money, and time until there's an appropriation for more people and more money. Um, the administration does not have enough to do quote unquote mass deportation. That's just a mathematical truth. Um, they want to do more. Clearly, they will seek those resources. But it takes time to hire people. It takes time to create more detention capacity. So none of this is an overnight ramping up at all. And each of these steps takes time. And I'll get to that. I just felt like I should put a picture up of ICE enforcement, because detention, because part of it can be part of the process. It's only nominally civil detention, but it looks like this. It's prisons, jails. It's very rare that there's an ICE facility. It's contracting with private prisons and jails. So detention is the worst part of all of this process. A quick fact check on numbers. The latest numbers that we have are a couple weeks old at this point. But we see in terms of detention, sure, there's an increase over time. This is just the last few years. But it wasn't as if Trump came in and despite ordering ICE to go arrest everybody, that the numbers started booming. It underscores what I said, that this takes time and resources that they don't have. Um, so it actually went down a tiny bit at the very beginning of 2025. Um, it will go up, but not in a straight line by any means. So, a few important rights to know. Non-citizens are constitutional people. The Constitution rarely refers to citizens, it refers to persons. Case after case affirms that non-citizens are persons, regardless of immigration status. They have the right to K to 12 education. I expect a challenge on this. I don't think it will be successful, but right now the law is children have a right to K to 12 public education, regardless of immigration status. The fear parents have about sending their kids to school is another story, and I'll touch on that later. But they have the right to go. Workers have rights. They have the right to be paid for their work, to sue if they're not paid, etc. The police have to protect people regardless of immigration status. And in fact, there's visas available for people who cooperate with the police. People, importantly, have the right to remain silent. More on that in when we talk about sort of safety planning. And then anybody caught up in the criminal system has all the rights any criminal defendant would, the right to an attorney, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm speeding through and I'm happy to address questions. And Bethany, if there's any I should be addressing as I go, I'm really not monitoring the chat, but I'm very happy to be interrupted.
We're okay. It looks like there was just one and someone else answered it, so we're good.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Love that. So in terms of is at risk from enforcement, people with criminal convictions and people who are in some kind of criminal system process at this point because they are easy for ICE to find. Um, ICE is under huge pressure to increase its numbers of arrests. It's hard to find people at their homes if they've moved, if they know their rights and there's no warrant. It's easier at jails and prisons. So those people are truly at risk. I mentioned a moment ago, people with final orders of removal. For a lot of reasons, people don't always leave after they've been ordered to leave. Um, because those folks don't need to go before the immigration court system, they're a more attractive target. So I expect them to be looking for those folks. And then people in Maryland and Frederick, Cecil, and Harford counties, because local police are deputized to act as immigration agents to start that arrest, detention, removal process I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So folks there need to be just extra careful not to come to the attention of local police. The category I worry a lot about is people subject to expedited removal. So let me explain. This is for people ICE encounters really anywhere. It's anywhere in the US who've been here less than 2 years. ICE needs to have a reasonable suspicion they've been here less than 2 years. What is that? It's going to be racial profiling, which is illegal, but I worry that won't be enough to stop it from happening. Um, if you've been here less than 2 years, you don't have a right to the court system. As we'll see, the court system is like the greatest gift in terms of giving people time to find lawyers, to figure out, like, is there a way they can stay legally, to sort their affairs out, all that kind of thing. And so if ICE puts you in expedited removal, you don't get that. The way out of that, there's two ways. One, show they're wrong. And I have a whole list of documentation later I'll share with you, but people who've been here more than 2 years should carry something. I don't know if library cards have issued in or whatever, but a school ID, a driver's license from 2 or more years ago, brilliant. And if not, another document maybe on the phone that shows like your rent payments or something.
Elizabeth,
Or,
we
yeah,
do
Bethany.
have a quick question. Is Carroll County cooperating with do they have the deputized okay. That was a
No,
question.
no. I always think it's Carol and it's Cecil,
Okay. Thank you.
as far as I know.
Okay.
Um, The other important thing about expedited removal, say somebody came in yesterday, and yes, they're subject to expedited removal. If they are afraid to go back home, all they need to do is alert whoever's arresting them that they're afraid. And that will trigger this sort of backdoor back into the court system so that they can have an asylum claim heard and evaluated. So people who are afraid will still get to go to court. And then people who ICE wrongly pulled over and said, hey, you look like you got here 6 months ago, um, they can show something and say, no, no, you got the wrong person. Those folks are at risk. But for everybody else, removal takes time, again, resources and money. The second bullet point here is the key. The immigration court system, as of today, has roughly 5 million cases in a backlog, which means somebody starting their case today is very unlikely to have that individual hearing on their case for about 2, maybe 3 years. That is valuable time for finding a lawyer, figuring out your options, making plans for your children, making plans for your small business, whatever it might be. Um, they might have a what's called a master calendar hearing first, and people may have come into libraries with questions about what is this document. That's like a status hearing. That's a I'm here, here's what's going on. 50 people might have a status hearing at the same time and same day. And it's really just for the court to sort out, okay, I'll hear your case on this date, your case on that date. Oh, you don't want to have your case heard? Okay, then here's your removal order, whatever. It's like an organizing docket. But if you want a hearing, it's going to take a couple, 3 years. So that gift of time is very reassuring to people. Nobody wants to be in court. I get that. But it's better than sort of that quick exit that I think is what people fear will happen. Some people may be detained, again, folks with the criminal issues, past immigration violations, people who are seen as a flight risk, a danger to the community. And those cases do move faster, like maybe 3 to 4 months instead of like 3 to 4 years. Um, and again, anybody afraid of returning should say that. Okay, that's the background on the system and people's rights. A few minutes on safety planning and preparedness. And I really mean two things by safety planning. One is sort of what do I do? How do I prepare myself if ICE shows up? And then the other is knowing steps people can take just in case the worst happens for childcare, financial issues, and all that kind of thing. So, in terms of ICE encounters, and I apologize, this gets a little repetitive. Um, the first thing to know is that most ICE encounters that aren't in public need a warrant, and they need a judicial warrant. So, I just want to show you what those look like. This is a judicial warrant. Any judicial warrant will have United States District Court at the top. It could look something like this or like that. And it will have the individual's name, address, etc. on it. Insufficient are things like this that have Homeland Security at the top. There's an old one on the left that says INS. I should take that photo down. But DHS has warrants. Those don't work. And that tends to be what they're using because they're easier to get. Those are not the same as these ones. These are the ones where you have to let somebody enter. Um, I'll just give this in case it's useful for you to know to talk to people about. There are links in here to sort of the little red cards that people are carrying and all that. But at home, ICE needs a warrant and it needs to be a judicial warrant. It's the time to assert rights. And one of the best things I've seen people do with community members is help them practice that because it can be really hard to say no to a police officer. And so people need to find their own way of saying that and asking to see the warrant and saying, I'm sorry, if you're going to come in, you need a warrant. Come back with a warrant. It needs to be for somebody who lives at that house. So they can't come in just to talk to anybody. If the person doesn't live there, they should say that. If they live there but aren't home, tell the officer that and they should come back later. Worst case, and the person is at home, that person should step outside to talk to ICE so that nobody else is arrested because, again, they're desperate to get their numbers up. And then people need to remember they have the right to remain silent, the right to speak to a lawyer. And I don't say this here, I say it later, but don't sign anything because you could be signing away your right to a hearing. Um, and they should communicate to ICE any sort of special needs. Uh, will ICE always be attentive? No, but surprisingly often they do take this stuff into account. Are there elderly people who need care? Is there a child who needs pickup? Are you on medication? Those are really good things to sort out before leaving. I know I'm speeding through. Court, I'll skip this basically. If somebody is going to court anyway, hopefully they have a lawyer and they should talk those issues through with their lawyer. So this is a little trickier because libraries are um, public places. Most parts of libraries are public places. And ICE can enter public places unless your library system has a policy. It would have to be sort of a system level policy talking about law enforcement actions at the library. But they typically need judicial warrants if they're looking for an individual person. So that same difference as before. I don't know. I didn't have a chance to research whether libraries are developing policies like this, but schools have a really good, most school systems have a pretty good setup now where whoever's at the front desk greeting ICE will say, okay, have a seat. I have to call somebody to talk through this warrant first. And then that person can verify it's a good warrant and all that stuff. Um, I think, and I'll pause here because I'm sort of going off my script, but I think the more likely scenario with libraries is just that law enforcement might come in and start talking to people. And so the next slide may be more useful. They always need reasonable suspicion that they're talking to a non-citizen. So before answering questions, that person should ask, am I free to go? That simple. Am I free to go? And if they say yes, they should politely say, I don't want to answer any questions and leave. Leave quietly. Don't run in case that creates a reasonable suspicion. Um, but am I free to go is a first question. If they're not, that means they are being detained. And then they can say, I don't want to answer any questions. I want to speak to a lawyer. All the other advice still goes, like let them know anything they need to know about medication, childcare, et cetera, et cetera. That's just the summary of all I said. In terms of what you can do as librarians, you can take pictures, you can take video of what's happening, and you can report the action. And there's a link at the very last slide to where you can report it. Um, just in case somebody's rights were violated. You might observe racial profiling in the library, and that's a constitutional violation. That violation could help the person get out of the deportation proceedings if they get a good lawyer. So, I've done that. Very satisfying to say, actually, everything about this came from racial profiling and therefore needs to be tossed out. So you can document. You can't disrupt, but you can record. And that's not nothing. In terms of safety planning, and the way I always talk to community members about this is that it's for the worst case, which we hope won't happen, much in the same way we create wills, even though we really hope, parents won't be killed in a car accident. Like some of this is just planning for dreadful events. Um, and so to the extent these ideas are helpful just as sort of good preparation, we offer them up. So finding an attorney, there's some links here to guides to finding attorneys. The third bullet point is the American Immigration Lawyers Association. It's not foolproof that somebody who's a member is going to be high quality, but it's a very good narrowing filter for quality. Um, and then I have links to other sort of free low-cost service providers. Anybody promising to, this is a scam going on right now. People say, well, if you give me $1,000 or $2,000, I'll fix your immigration status. That's just a lie. If that person doesn't know anything about the individual situation, they can't make that promise. They're just taking the person's money. And also notarios will often hold out that they are immigration attorneys because notario is a kind of attorney in a lot of Latin America, and they are not attorneys. So it disturbs me that there are scams being perpetrated on scared people right now, and those are two of the ones you tend to see. There's not a lot of pro bono help right now, I will be honest. But one thing that can be good is for people to pay a consultation fee. That is very normal. That's not a scam. You're talking to an actual attorney and they cost $250 for consultation. What they get out of the consultation is an answer about whether there is actually anything they can do, and often there is. And then they can decide, okay, do I want to raise the money? Do I want to dip into whatever savings I have to hire an attorney or not? But they're making that decision from a better place. And so, especially if somebody is arrested and starts in this 2 to 3 year court proceeding, it's a great time to ask for help to finance an attorney in the Annapolis Immigration Justice Network. Annapolis Immigrant Justice Network has been doing just fabulous work building that capacity in Anne Arundel. Powers of attorney, super useful, and they can be used for all kinds of things. I just put a couple examples here, giving somebody access to your bank account, selling your car, talking to your doctor, specifically for child care, child custody. Maryland has wonderful standby guardianship laws. There's sort of a step-by-step guide is the first link, and then the actual form is the second link. They're only good for 6 months, but the nice thing about these is you're not signing away your rights right away. It's if something happens to me, like a medical emergency or an ICE arrest, at that point, it kicks into um, uh, effectiveness. And then there's somebody who can talk to the schools, pick up your children, talk to their doctors, all that stuff. So they're really nice sort of safety documents. You're keeping all your rights, but if some triggering event happens, then you know somebody else has what they need to take care of children. More guides here in terms of safety planning. Um, so these are just in the links. One of the best things people can do is gather documentation. Uh, That's free. Just put all your stuff in one place. So there's a list on the left, passports, making sure people have passports either for the US for those kids born here or the home country. That may be helpful at some point. And then the stuff in the box on the right is just key documents it's good to have in one place electronically or a plastic bag of documents. I don't care what it is, but gathering as much as you have in one place and then making sure somebody you trust knows where it is. That's really helpful. Somebody's detained, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out all the stuff they need to do if we have those documents handy, just for example. It's also just good adulting, and I've been trying to do this for myself. I'm 90% there. Um, so the famous last slide before I take questions. There's some school-related resources. I know you all are librarians, but there's some similarities in the issues and the framing, and there's just great, good resources. So I put them up there. If you want to track data that's reliable, Austin Coker, he actually lives in Baltimore, but he's been doing national and international work educating people on ICE data. He's just extraordinary. I go to him when I need to know what's actually happening. So he has a Substack. There's a couple of different litigation and policy trackers so you can see the status of challenges to things like, for example, birthright citizenship. And then that last link I mentioned earlier, if something did happen that you observed, there's a form here for reporting that to ICE. So at this point, I will stop sharing. I'm going to put my link to these documents in the chat, and then I want to hear your questions because I went through that all really fast. Okay, it's in the chat. So
I do
actually,
have a quick question.
can I ask a
Yeah.
question first? Does
Mhm.
anybody know of a good library policy? Maybe this would be a good time to share in terms of what to happen, what to do if ICE were to show up.
I think we did create a policy. Now don't ask me what it says. Just I'm looking. I'm gonna look at it right now.
It's
Um,
long. We can send it to you.
oh,
It's
okay.
long, but we can send it to you. I,
Kathy,
I,
if you are looking at it, can you give like a 2 or 3 sentence basics on what to do if ICE shows up?
um, 2 or 3 sentences. Let me
If
see. I took it from the Brooklyn, New York, template that they had made. Hold on a second.
I can just say this, that at one of the meetings that I think Jessa was involved with and the police department was attending, our local police, one of the things they said is if ICE shows up and they are wanting to talk with people, just kind of work with them, work with the ICE people. Don't say you have to leave or anything like that. Just kind of work with them. And Jess, I don't know if you would have anything to add because I know you were part of that meeting, but
Yeah, I know there has been a lot of conversations in some, Anne Arundel County has and kind of immigration service providers meetings, and I think those are the ones that you're referring to. There's been some conversation about public versus private places, and so what that means for restaurants, what that means for libraries. The school, I think, is different because the school system has the benefit of everybody has to check in. It's not just open, where I think the library, the challenge is anybody can walk in. And then I think everybody's kind of creating their own policy. So, for us, if that happened and they came to the AIJN office, we've talked to attorneys, and the first thing to do is to call our attorney, ask for a warrant, and make sure that everything is being followed before we just say, turn everything over.
it's also going to be different if ICE comes in looking for a staff member versus looking for somebody in the public. I think if it's a staff member, we certainly can have the staff member go to a non-public area, and they could almost treat it the same way you were discussing how to deal with a visit to your home. Um,
Yeah.
I'm saying this off the cuff, and I really want to get back to the document that Kathy's looking at. And for everybody here, we can come back with maybe some of the key points, because I know that's what you want is the minute somebody's there, you don't want to be like, oh my God, where's the policy? You want to know 1 or 2 things that you need to do right then.
so I just,
Exactly. Just like we tell the community members to know, like to have it deep in their bones what they would say if ICE came to the door, so it's automatic. You want to have that same sense of, okay, I know exactly what to do.
so I put the top section that kind of summarizes it in the chat. It's not, it's not 3 sentences, but it's like, there's a lot more to it, but that's like those are the main points that we share with staff.
I saw a question in here about getting detained for speaking Spanish. I mean, yeah, that's such a reasonable fear. You should ask, it is not illegal to speak Spanish in this country. It's February 24th, 2025, and that is still true. And so you should just ask, am I being detained? What is the basis? Is it because I was speaking Spanish? Because that's insufficient. You just say that. Um, and then, am I free to leave? So same thing. Um, that is not a basis for a stop. Looking a certain way is not a basis, and speaking another language is not a basis. The trick is there really is no basis. Like there is no basis that is constitutional for stopping somebody of suspecting they're an undocumented immigrant. That's going to require seriously constitutionally problematic profiling. It may happen anyway, which is why it's so important to say, am I free to go? Am I being detained? What is the basis? And I would be assertive in that case and just say my language and skin color are not enough. Is there some other reason you're detaining me? Um, I realize that's unpleasant, but yeah.
So
And
one,
then get the officer's name because they could be sued for that. They know they can be sued for that because they have been sued for that. So just if nothing helps in the moment if a constitutional violation is happening, nothing helps. But there's a lot that can be done after. So at least I really hope I'm not minimizing anything with my response.
so there is one question that Nori put into the chat. If we get detained during lunch break or out in the community for whatever reason, maybe because they were speaking Spanish, what steps should they take? Should we alert our supervisor or follow the steps on the slides? So I don't know if you can speak to that. I
Yeah,
think,
that's the one I was actually just responding to.
okay, good enough.
So making sure that you know if you're being detained or not. Are they just on a fishing expedition? They would need to be able to articulate why and getting their name and information because that's
Got
not
it.
okay.
And then I assume to me, it doesn't seem like the most important thing is to notify your supervisor. You have a lot of things to deal with first, but notify the supervisor when you can.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, if you're detained and you're not going to be back in the office, the staff are going to be wondering. So whenever you can notify the supervisor, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah. And I should clarify when I say am I being detained, I mean in the same way. Um, I don't mean going to immigration detention. I mean, am I in a conversation with an officer where I am not free to leave? Um, like stop and frisk in, New York City. Like those folks who are being frisked were being detained, like right there on the street. And so if you're being detained, they need to have a reason for continuing to keep you there and asking you questions. Um, but if you're free to go, you're free to go and go peacefully.
Elizabeth, are the slides that you've presented us with, are those available? Do you have those in Spanish by any chance?
Not yet. I'm working
Okay.
on it and I can
Okay.
email you and Jessa when they're available.
Great. Yeah, there's some good information in there. Not from a work standpoint, but personally, I think I would like to share some of that information and it would be more helpful.
I also have an embarrassingly low quality version of this talk that I did myself in Spanish,
Okay.
which I could share.
Well, I personally would like to have that. So you can send that to me. I have a community I would like to share that with. I think it was very helpful.
I also saw I can pass along, I think on Wednesday this week, the ACLU is doing a Spanish language training and it has been sent to me a couple of different ways. And so I'm happy to share. I'm not sure
Great.
exactly what it's covering, but
Okay.
to share out other great resources.
And
Yeah, I
they
think
really are
from
the
an
expert.
informational standpoint, it would be great to
Yeah.
be able to share that with some of our customers.
The other thing in the chat is Lynette is asking, are our staff allowed to record? That really is not addressed in this photographing and filming and recording policy, I don't think. I think that's something that we're going to need to discuss unless you have an answer to that. I don't know. I think generally I'm thinking that's not what we want to do, but that's just totally off the cuff on my part. I think we need to have some discussion.
I don't have an answer for that. I would recommend we check with Jay and then follow up.
Okay, Jay being our library's attorney.
Yep.
Our general counsel. So
While you're doing that, a question I would have as well is if you would be allowed to, you certainly cannot interfere with their work, but are you allowed to make an announcement that we have an officer from Homeland Security in the building and we request that everybody remain calm, something like that to alert people to what's going on? Because we have heard people doing that just so people can make a choice about whether they stay or leave. And I don't know if that would be seen as disruptive, so that might be a good question for your attorney as well.
okay, and I see the chat is moving along there too. So we'll look further into this and try to get some guidance back out to everybody. I appreciate that, Lynette.
other questions I might be able to answer. I really did a speed through of sort of the current situation and different statuses and whatnot, but um, this is- oh,
Would it be appropriate to share what other libraries have experienced? Um, I'm not sure I understand, Lynette.
I'll just speak. It's easier
Okay,
than texting.
that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Back and forth, back and forth. No, I just and I'm not sure how it would be helpful. I don't know if it would be helpful, but I'm just wondering if is this happening at libraries? I mean, there were indications at our staff meeting that there were rumors that things had happened at other libraries, but I don't know if that would be a question for the Immigration Justice Network folks. You know, just to get a sense of what is in fact going on, either in our county or in the state of Maryland.
I
Again,
think,
I'm not sure how
yeah,
it's helpful, but I'm just feel like it might be.
I think it's really helpful again in terms of sort of right sizing the anxiety level. And I am not, I follow this stuff pretty minutely, and I'm on a few different national networks of people who follow things minutely. I have not heard of library enforcement yet. Um, if it were to happen, it would happen in a place with known to have, a heavily Latino community, just at least in Maryland, that's what it would look like. But I haven't heard of it. And I've only heard of two school incidents, and one of those was sort of a mistake. It was Secret Service, it wasn't related to immigration, and the other was imposters. Again, I expect ICE to do a little of this to create fear. Um, but it's not widespread yet. Jessa, I don't know if you've heard anything different.
Yeah, we also have not heard, and there's a big piece of this too, where there are different forums and group chats and Facebook groups where people are saying, "Oh, ICE is here," and ICE, and so it can be really difficult to verify that information, and so there's this balance of wanting people to know what's going on with also not wanting to perpetuate this constant fear. People, I mean, in the first couple weeks of the administration, we had clients calling and saying they weren't sending their kids to school and just how afraid they were to even go outside. But I think kind of to what Liz has spoken about, more and more, there's kind of realizing that there has to be a ramping up period and that it's not possible to do right. It did not happen. There was not mass deportations in this country on day one because that infrastructure doesn't exist yet. But that's not, and I think what's so critical about doing this work now, it's not like, okay, it can't happen right now, so it's fine. Is that family preparedness and making sure that even having people have all their documents and also A numbers so that you can track somebody if and when they are detained. So making sure that exists, but then also that education with the Know Your Rights so that people are better prepared. Because I think it would be, I wouldn't want anyone walking away being like, oh, this is not an issue, this isn't going to be a problem. It really is about kind of being prepared now, knowing that very likely will ramp up.
And one thing about my slides, because they're on the Google Slides, I tweak them pretty constantly. And so as information changes that affects my assessment, there will be more recent data. There'll be more sort of maybe some more subtle things about sort of how we reassure people and who maybe is more at risk now, et cetera. Um, it's a living document. So please feel free to check back on them like in a month. And I do think the scenario by summer may be different in terms of at least detention capacity. Um, yeah.
I will also mention just, I know that we've said in the chat that there's not anything that we know of from Maryland. Several of us are on national listservs as well. So the Urban Libraries Council, various lists there. I think we would have heard about it there, and I haven't heard it from, it's 150 of the large library systems all around the country, and that includes the red state areas where you might expect more of it. But so far, it's more contingency planning and trying to
Yeah.
to try to make sure you're ahead of the curve on this before it starts happening.
Which is why I'm so incredibly heartened. There's 47 people on this call. Like that honestly almost puts tears in my eyes. I don't cry very easily, but it's you all are doing exactly what needs to happen, and that just makes my heart feel good. So, any other questions? I know y'all are librarians and get all the answers yourselves, but you could just ask me. Should we go ahead and wrap up, Bethany, Jessa? Jessa, and I know it's kind of not exactly your thing, but is there anything you want to say AIJN wise?
Yeah, I can let everyone know because I haven't met everyone. Sorry, I was just jumping in. I'm Jessa Coulter. I'm the executive director of Annapolis Immigration Justice Network. I am not an immigration attorney. AIJN started in 2017. It was community members, people from the faith community who came together and seeing conditions much like we're seeing today. So this is not what we believe in, and really organized in support of immigrants, and very quickly realized that legal representation is so critical and probably the most important thing in terms of safety and stability. And so we're Annapolis Immigration Justice Network, but we serve all immigrants all throughout Anne Arundel County. And what we do is we partner with private attorneys and we operate a legal fund. So we provide financial assistance for immigrants to pay for legal representation. And so we're working, when Liz was going through those first slides of kind of the different pathways, we are working with really vulnerable population with folks who are seeking asylum, with children who've been abused, abandoned, or neglected. We've had a couple cases, victims of human trafficking and other crimes. And so that's kind of the types of cases that we are seeing and what we're working with. And that first step of what we do is AIJN provides, we pay for a consultation with a private attorney to determine whether or not someone's eligible. And so what's very exciting to me about the work that we do, we have a 96% success rate of favorable outcomes in our court hearings for the cases we're funding. And that's because we're really funding people who are eligible to apply for legal relief. They fall into one of those categories under our immigration system. We are a nonpartisan organization. We just work within the immigration system as it exists. And right now we're trying to do a lot of outreach with Know Your Rights and I have tons of red cards if you all need more. Making sure people have access to this information because it really is critical. And we're so happy I'm so happy to be in touch with the library and the school system, and to be in Anne Arundel County where there has been a lot of great organizing. I mean, since the election, really, the Office of Multicultural Affairs for the county executive has created a family preparedness workbook specific to our county. I can put that link on there too. But if you all ever need anything, I can pop my email in also if folks want to get connected locally. And Liz, we're very grateful to have an incredible legal advisory board. The very first call that I made was to that board to determine where do we go from here and how can we ensure that people are supported. And the overwhelming message was legal representation is more important than ever. So we're really working to help meet that need in the county, which is really significant. And I'll put that in.
All right.
Thank you both for Jessica.
I think that's probably good. It was really an honor to talk to you all. I love librarians. I always have. Wrong career choice to not be a librarian, but thank you for all you do, not just in this area, but all you do.
Thank you, but thank you for being here. And Jessa, I know I got to meet you and a number of the advocates at the budget town halls, and I think that the stories that your clients were telling and that you were telling are kind of heart-wrenching kinds of stories. So it's great work that you're doing. I hope that the county executive funds everything you're asking for.
Well, that's very kind. I also loved hearing the all of the great stories about the library. I'm also a big fan of the library. And so I was happy to get to go to those and hear about all of the ways that the library is supporting, the community. And I think so much what's really great about I think what I really like also about the model that we have is AIJN focuses really exclusively on legal representation. And we partner with other organizations and agencies throughout the county for those other needs because we tend to work with the same folks. They're also experiencing food insecurity, or they also need diapers for their kids, or they also need coats, and they're going to the libraries for these programs also. So I really feel so strongly in the need to collaborate and how much stronger we are in community. So, oh, great. And then, oh, I
What
see.
Allison just posted in the chat?
Yes.
Amazing. Everybody needs to click on that. I'm just glancing at it. It is so good. It is so good. Whoever did all that, that's amazing. And I'm bookmarking it to share with people. So thank you. All right, I will go ahead and close this up. It is recording, and I'll send you that recording afterwards, Bethany, and I'll work on the
Thank you so
Spanish
much.
side.
Yep, and I'll get that posted. Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care, all.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.